Howdy, guys, and welcome to Cliff Notes Travel. Now, I love all kinds of reality TV, and I've traveled all over the world as part of my job. So combining those two together as the Big Brother season wraps up, I thought it would just be a perfect next step to go ahead and cover this season's Amazing Race. So welcome to the recap for The Amazing Race, Season 32, Episode 1. Now, first of all, just a little background this particular season. Amazing Race Season 32 was apparently filmed in late 2018. So it's been almost 2 years since these teams competed. And in all that time, they haven't been able to tell their friends or loved ones how they did. Someone got the first boot. They couldn't tell anyone about that. Someone won $1 million and has been sitting on that information for 2 years. So as a viewer, and for the teams as well, I'm glad that CBS is finally showing The Amazing Race. We get to watch them race around the world, and I'm so excited to be talking about it. So let's start right off the bat. The 11 teams that we had this season. I don't even know all the names yet. We'll learn them as we go on, I'm sure. But of the 11 teams, there's really five of these teams that stood out for me because I really want to cheer for them for other reasons. So with that in mind, one team that I'm really excited to be cheering for is the nerd Tinder couple. It's a couple that they're self-proclaimed nerds. They met on Tinder, and they just look like they're going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to follow them. Another duo that I'm really going to be cheering for, there's a father-son duo, apparently a common passion for basketball. The dad looks like he's probably somewhat close to my age, so I can really empathize with him. I'm going to be interested to see how he does in the challenges as he races all over the world, cheering for him as well. We've got the bearded volleyball players. These are two brothers that played volleyball professionally in Greece together, big old long beards and everything. I think they may be kind of fun to watch also. And then finally, we've got the Kentucky buddies that are catfish noodlers. And I wasn't really sure what the term meant, but it actually means sticking your hand into a catfish hole in the riverbanks, let the catfish latch on your hand, pull it out, so you catch a catfish in that way. So yeah, there you go. That's an interesting way to catch a fish, huh? But these two buddies are from Kentucky, and they're catfish noodlers. So those four teams, be cheered for. I think it's gonna be fun to watch them. We've got another team. They describe themselves as the Cajun Asian Sisters from Louisiana. Seems like there's a lot of sibling rivalry between these two. I think we're going to see a lot of tension within this team as they kind of compete against each other, give each other a hard time. I also think this may be the team that competes that causes a bit of tension with other teams as well. So they're going to be the team that brings the drama most weeks, I think. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on them also as well. So how does the thing start? They start in Los Angeles this year at the Hollywood Bowl. Phil Keegan says, all right, guys, go grab your bags, get your first clue, and head to your first location. They take off running to grab their bags to get to the cab first so they can get to the airport first. Now, in this day and age, in the early seasons of Amazing Race, everyone's trying to book the best flight. Do we go direct? Do we go make a stop somewhere that may be issues? In this day and age, I don't think you can do that anymore. I'm guessing that everyone was on the same flight, and there wasn't any planning of that sort to be done, which means they really don't have to race to the airport. But it makes for good filming to have them all take off full speed at the very first beginning, the first episode. But they get to the airport. They're reading their clues. The first place they're heading to is Trinidad, the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. I've been there. I love it. What a fantastic place to start. I just love that country. For those of you who don't know, Trinidad and Tobago, two different islands right next to each other. They're located in the very southern part of the Caribbean Ocean. I mean, the very southern part. Not too far from the coast of South America, right offshore from Venezuela, in fact. And so it's a long way to go. It's a very southern part of the Caribbean Ocean. Now, Phil talks in the episode. He says Trinidad is very ethnically diverse country, and it absolutely is. As I recall, it's about 1/3 African, 1/3 Indian, 1/3 mixed race, Asian, Caucasian, a lot of different little mixtures in that final third. But all of those cultures combined just makes for such a diverse nation, such friendly people. It's just incredible. And the food there, that mix of Indian and African cultures in Trinidad and Tobago, it just leads to some amazing food dishes. Roti, cassava, spicy stews, curries. I just ate like a king while I was in Trinidad. And again, it's just incredibly friendly people. So all the teams arrive in Port of Spain, which is the capital of Trinidad. They arrive around 9 o'clock or so. It's by the time they get out of the airport and get into the capital itself, it's going to be probably close to midnight. And so their first clue once they get to Trinidad, or their first task, they have to find an all-night fruit stand that's located downtown. And it's funny because when they get to this fruit stand, I kind of think I recognize where they're at. And if so, just down the street from this all-night fruit stand is just kind of a nondescript fast food restaurant. But at this place, they serve the best and the spiciest fried chicken that I've probably ever tasted in my entire life. I ate there one afternoon, not expecting anything. And it was just phenomenal. 15 years later, and I still remember that fried chicken from Port of Spain, Trinidad. But they get to the fruit stand downtown, and immediately they get their next clue. And the next clue, they have to take an empty oil barrel and roll it down the street. I think they said about a quarter mile or so. They have to roll it to a big party that's going on. Costume characters, music, everything else. Amongst all the dancers and music and everything else, they have to find a guy that's in costume, that's all in black, and get a new clue from him. There's music and dancing everywhere. It looks like it's probably they're celebrating Carnival, which is a South American version of our version of Mardi Gras that's celebrated in New Orleans and elsewhere. And so it's just a fun party type atmosphere. But amongst all that, there's a one guy in black, and it's important that they find him first because 7 teams that find them first and get the first clues have an early flight the next morning to Tobago for their next task. The last 4 teams that find them, they're going to be on a secondary flight. I think there's about a 40-minute flight difference between the two of them. So it's important that you get there as quickly as you can. Now, why an empty barrel that they're rolling down the street? I'll explain it in just a little bit, but there is something to do with empty barrels. So rolling these barrels down the street, it's a bit of a physical task. We see a few teams struggling, such as the married parents. These are bulky barrels, and they're trying to roll it, trying to keep it straight and everything and go fast. They're having some difficulties with it. But what was funny, it's not just them that's having the issues. The brothers that are volleyball players, I thought it was funny watching them struggle as well. And they complained it's because of the backpacks that they're wearing. They're way overweight. They've got huge backpacks. These are big old burly guys, but they've got huge backpacks on their back. And it gets into one of the first strategies I always think about when I watch The Amazing Races. What is the strategy for packing these backpacks? You're in hot weather environments. You're in cold weather environments. You have to protect yourself against the rain and all different kinds of wet, everything, different conditions. You want to pack with as much gear so that you're always ready for whatever situations you may be dealing with. But you also want to pack as light as possible so you can easily throw it into the back of a taxi, the overhead on a plane, or in this case, when you're rolling a barrel down the street and you're kind of leaning over. Well, the volleyball players didn't do that. They packed everything possible. I'm going to be a little curious if episodes going forward, if we see those backpacks starting to get a whole lot lighter as they maybe throw some things out along the way, because it didn't look easy with them leaning over and having that backpacks on their back. We see some different strategies taking place. Most people are trying to go as fast as possible, knowing that they need to get to find the clue and get the earlier flight the next day to Tobago. But we do have one team, and this is the self-described smart brother, smart sister of Indian descent. And they're actually laying back away from everyone. I'll say, if I recall, they said, they were afraid maybe if they were rushing too hard, trip over someone, get injured, something like that. So they're just going to lay back and just stay behind the other teams. I think that's a little dangerous. I think there's a disadvantage with that, in that if you get too far behind, you may not be able to watch these other teams. You may not be able to follow them. If they all take a right turn and you don't see that, and then you take a left, you could have issues. If they're trying to complete a task, if you're so far behind, you can't watch and see what techniques they use to complete it. You may not gain from their experience as well. So there's no room for error. If you're intentionally hanging back, it may spell some problems for the brothers and sisters somewhere down the road, but we'll see. So we have that. Now, when the teams finally arrive at the park, this big open area, in addition to the costumed dancers, we see and hear pan drums, steel drums being played. And that gets me back to what I said a little while ago, back to those oil barrels they're rolling down the streets. And what does that have to do with steel drums? Well, here's the thing. Trinidad has been a major oil exporter since World War II, even before that. And the island used to be just covered with empty oil barrels because of the oil industry that was going on. Well, someone, a very ingenious someone in Trinidad, figured out that we've got all these oil barrels laying around that no one knows what to do with. They figured out they could cut the tops off these barrels, bang depressions into them that would create different sounds when you banged on different parts of the oil drum. And as a result, they created a brand new unique musical instrument with a new unique sound as well. It kind of, when you hear calypso music, it's the sound that we hear with a pan drum, a steel drum as well. Now, how could you go to Trinidad for business, for pleasure, whatever, and not look at these steel drums and want to have one of your own? Well, not me. So as my first little show and tell, I just wanted to show y'all my own steel drum from Trinidad and Tobago. And you can see on the top, it's got all the different notes listed so that I can actually. Yeah, I may not be the most musical, but it's really cool. And to have a professional set of steel drums and watch the masters playing, it just makes you happy hearing that kind of music. But yeah, I'm happy to have my little steel drum that I brought back from Tobago. So just with that in mind, one of the times I was in Tobago, I actually was there during the Pan Drum Festival. It's called Panorama, if I recall. All day long, they had these gigantic 30, 40 member steel drum bands that would compete one after the other in front of judges to have the best sounds, best music, and everything. It's just so much fun. This was held in a giant park in the middle of the capital called Queens Park Savannah. And I think that's where this party is that all the amazing race guests have to go find the costumed character. But the bands played all day long. I just sat there and ate all my different foods and listened to the bands play. Just had a blast. Y'all can tell I love Trinidad, right? That's great. But anyway, so the guests eventually, all 11 teams do find the costumed character. They get their clues. They call it a night. The next morning, they're going to go on 2 different flights to Tobago. And again, remember, we've got a 40-minute cushion between flight number 1 and flight number 2. So we cut to the next morning where they're all heading to Tobago. Now, if I was on the first flight, I had a 40-minute lead on the last 4 teams. I truly think this is where I would be trying to develop some alliances with some of the other teams, because here's the thing. It's only the last team at every leg, every pit stop that potentially gets eliminated. So it really doesn't matter so much where you place as long as you don't place last. I think taking some of these other teams that may not be as worried about finishing last because they've got this 40-minute lead, saying, look, we won't U-turn you if you don't U-turn us, and we'll help you figure out how to quickly solve these tasks if you'll help us and give us some hints, and vice versa. Seems like a perfect place to start developing some alliances. We didn't see them on the plane, so we don't know if that was the case or not, but that's what I'd be doing. So at this point in time, we see them landing in Tobago. They quickly have to pick out boats. Each team gets in a boat and is driven out to a little location, just a little offshore in water that's somewhere between waist level and chest level deep. And there's an area about the size of a football field with, I think, 125 different fish attached to lines going back and forth across this big open area of the water. And at this point, every team has their own fish, wooden fish inside their boat, and a combination to a lock. And they have to remember the color combinations on their specific fish, because when they jump into water, they've got to go up and down all these lines and find that one fish out of the 125 that has the same color combination as their own. At that point, they can enter the combination that they had inside the boat, unlock that fish, and proceed on to the next competition. So sounds easy enough, right? Just remember the colors, jump in, do the combination. Well, as we find out, not quite so easy. We've got the married parents. These are the parents that kind of had problems rolling the barrels. Well, now they jump in the water. They remember the combination lock. They don't remember the color pattern that was in their boat that's specific to that combination. So instead, they just decide they're just going to go up and down and check every single fish and try the same combination on every single one of them till it works. That is a dangerous strategy. You got 125 fish to try. That's a lot of fish to be entering combinations on. But they got lucky. It worked, I think, right about in the middle. The fish number 55 or 56 was a combination that worked. So they actually probably saved a little time rather than having to go back to the boat and look at color combinations and all that. Plus, they weren't spending nearly as much time going from fish to fish to fish, looking at the patterns and trying to see if it matched up. They just went to the fish, tried the combination, moved on to the next one. So they got lucky, I think, but it did work for them. So that was an interesting strategy. Now, everyone is yelling out colors. They're saying, oh, why, are we yellow, red, blue? No, you're blue, green, yellow. And I can see why it gets very confusing trying to keep that in mind with all these other teams hollering out their colors as well. Especially if you're in the last flight, you already know that you're 40 minutes behind the rest of the teams. A lot of pressure that some of these teams were dealing with. Another pressure that we saw, and I think I'm going to be curious to see how this continues throughout the whole competition. The Olympic athletes, one of the two ladies on that team talks about how she's dyslexic, which is making it really difficult for her to enter the combination and remember these color patterns. And it turns out that she actually was entering, two of the numbers were transposed, if I recall, on the combination lock. So they weren't sure if they had entered it correctly or if they needed to go back and try it again. And as a result, she says, being dyslexic, this is just a hard one. And it does turn out they're the very last team at this particular competition to find their fish and get it unlocked. So they're a little bit behind the 8 ball at this point in time. But eventually, everyone finds the correct fish. They have to hop back in their boat, head back to shore. And at that point, they go on to the next challenge. And the next challenge, Pandrum's still going on. We aren't through with the Pandrums yet. They now have to find an instructor to teach them lines, the Banana Boat song, Day-O, Day-O. They have to play the steel drum along with the rest of the steel drum band. And when it's their turn, they have to enter the notes. It sounds easy enough playing those musical notes, but it's 8 lines that you have to remember. You have to hit the note correctly and you have to hit it at the right tempo. And you have to do all that perfectly or else the band leader will give you a big X and make you do it over again, which means you have to go to the back of the line, watch all the other teams try their luck at it. And so it takes a little bit of time as well. And even worse, the teams didn't get to pick whether or not who was going for it. They picked which of the team members was going to do this particular challenge before they knew what the challenge was. So you don't really know when you're deciding which person is going to do it. And it's got to be hard to sit there and watch your partner struggle and there's nothing you can do about it. We talked about dyslexia, same situation. The Olympic athlete who's dyslexic ends up being the one that has to read the notes and try to do this competition. And she has a hard time with this one as well. But eventually she does solve it. So props to her for doing it. We saw tonight that the football player and the Olympic athletes both probably didn't pick the person that was best in position to play a lot of musical notes, and they struggled as a result. We do see the married parents who kind of had some issues with the first few challenges. They finished first. They move on to the next challenge. So rolling the barrels, forgetting the fish colored patterns, it worked out. They were able to overcome it, and they finished this challenge first, move on to the final one. And the final challenge of this episode, they move on to goat racing. How appropriate that the parents are the ones that get to deal with the kids first. I just had to throw that in there. All right, so the next stage takes place at a long grassy area with viewing stands on both sides. It's a goat racing arena. I never even knew they did goat racing, but they do it in Trinidad or Tobago. And these goats are strong. They'll pull you along. It's not so much you leading them, it's them leading you. Looking at this racing arena, it just makes me kind of go back and visit Tobago sometime in the future and watch some real races. Do they bet on the goats? And if so, what makes a good racing goat? Is there someone at the end waving lettuce or something to get them to the end? I don't know, but I want to know more now about the goat racing. But while the married parents are there and getting ready to do that, we still see the steel drum, some teams having some issues. The NFL players are in a bind. They eventually solve it. I think they are third from last. They solve it. But unfortunately, the boat they're in only has one working boat motor. Everyone else has two motors on it, so they're going a little bit slower. They eventually get passed by the Olympic athletes who were second to last before solving the steel drums. So they're getting a little behind. They're getting a little nervous that they're going to get passed by everyone. But eventually, most people get to the goat racing. It's pretty funny watching them. Again, the only people who really lead the goats are the Olympic athletes. They're fast and they're kind of dragging the goats along. Everyone else is just trying to hold on for dear life. We saw the Cajun Asian sisters. I believe that's who it was. One of them just gets thrown to the ground as this goat just yanks the rope out from her. But one at a time, they check in at the checkpoint with Phil and realize they haven't been eliminated. Eventually, it comes down to the NFL football players in the slow boat and the buddies from Kentucky, the catfish noodlers, who really had difficult playing this steel drums, getting it to work. But eventually, we see the NFL players show up at the goat arena. They grab these goats, get dragged across the finish line. They find out that they are team number 10, which means, sure enough, our catfish noodlers come in as the very last team, number 11. They get to the mat. And sometimes not every checkpoint's an elimination checkpoint. I was hoping that wasn't the case here. Amazing Race does such a good job of casting teams. I don't want to see any team go home this early. But unfortunately, this is an elimination checkpoint. And Phil informs our catfish noodlers from Kentucky that they have been eliminated from the race. I hated to see it. I thought they were going to be fun to watch, but it is what it is. So at this point in time, we've gone from 11 teams down to 10 teams. Lots of times at this point, you stop. You say, all right, now take a break, spend the night here, and then we'll start the race again tomorrow. Phil says, no, the race continues. Here's your clue. Y'all need to go ahead and take off immediately for your next stop. And it turns out their next stop, Bogota, Colombia. I've been to Bogota. I like Bogota as well. So I'm excited to see the next episode, see what happens there as well. So there you have it, guys. Episode 1. Season 32 of The Amazing Race. I'm going to have so much fun watching these teams chase each other around the world and solve all these physical and mental challenges. I hope y'all watch along with me. I look forward to discussing the season and seeing who finishes up on top. Guys, y'all have a great one. If you get a chance, investigate Trinidad Tobago. It's a fantastic place. SKD 143. Cheers, guys. Bye.